haven't left
you
us
know,
yet, have you?
too much controversy up
The
here.
lights changed, I mean,
Yeah, sure, they've got it self-propelled.
Trying to steer clear of the controversy.
so we did, we just looked up.
Welcome, everybody, to the Rye Town Park Commission meeting of December 20th, 2016. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Paul Noto, would you lead us?
Certainly. Flag is to my right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Debbie, roll call, please.
Commissioner Julie Killian,
Here.
Commissioner Dennis Pilla,
Here.
Commissioner Joseph Sack, Commissioner Benedict Salanitro,
Present.
Commissioner Paul Rosenberg,
Here.
President Gary Zuckerman.
Here, and Mayor Sack has advised us that he will be just a little bit late and to start without him. And thank you for that, Julie.
Yep.
And speak of Mayor Sack,
Good timing.
we will wait. Please mark Mayor Sack as present.
Done.
All right, how are you? Sorry I'm late.
No problem.
Commissioners?
Mayor?
Mayor, good evening.
We have minutes. Debbie, I'm not looking on mine.
Yeah, that's an odd.
No, we have minutes for the special meeting of November 9th and the meeting of November 15th.
Yep.
All right? Those, you copied that from the last one. That was
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the second draft. November 9th and November 15th. Has everybody had a chance to read them?
Yes.
They were slightly amended. May I have a motion and a second for both sets?
Motion to accept?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have any public comment this evening on non-agenda items? Mr. Gold.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Russell Gold, Hayward Place from Rye, New York. This is just a comment on what was a slight change of procedure here. It happened a few months ago where, from what I understand, very good reason, we changed had a little modification in the agenda that we had public comment for any non-agenda items, all right? So presumably, that there would be public comment for agenda items when they came up.
Correct.
So 2 months ago, I noticed in October, there was a discussion about amending the short-term lease from 2 years to 1 year. And the vote took place, and I thought it was just in deference to the Portchester commissioner who was sitting in for Mayor Pila. And we had the vote, but not all the comment was heard, all right? So I said, okay, it was just because I understood that gentleman had to leave early that day, so I let it go. Then last month, the same thing happened again, where you took a vote, but not everybody had the opportunity to comment. Okay, it was sort of testimonials for John Ambrose and his company. So anyway, it's not a big deal, but I just want to say, if we're going to do it this way, fine, but please be cognizant and allow everybody the opportunity to comment for these agenda items later in the meeting.
Thank you. Point well taken. And I'll try to be more cognizant, and all the commissioners can also weigh in on that if we have that oversight.
Thank you.
Obviously, the idea
It's a big
is.
deal, actually. So thank you for
Yeah.
saying that.
The idea is that we would take comment on the agenda item as it appears, and if we don't, then it's an oversight on our
I
part.
completely agree, and it was for expedience sake that we did that you made that change, and I totally agree with it.
Actually, I copied that from the procedure that I saw in the city of Rye on their agendas.
Okay, there you go.
Except we do always ask for if anyone has a comment on the agenda item.
Yeah, well, we always do too. That was an oversight.
Great,
Thank you. We'll be more cognizant in the future.
I didn't realize we were a standard now. That's,
Wow, I'll have to look into that, Mayor.
No, it's,
Actually, but if you have someone who comments every time you invite, I'm not gonna say, we're on camera.
all right.
This is why sometimes we get home at 1 o'clock in the morning and we listen to everyone.
I can
Well,
relate.
we always listen to everybody, but
Absolutely.
it makes more sense to listen to people when the agenda item is being spoken of,
Yes,
rather than having people speak before the agenda item comes up. Park management report.
Hi, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Well, we're still in off-season, and from what I could see, people are still enjoying our park. As far as operations goes, we still have 2 maintenance men on staff. They've been working, scraping and painting all of the interior buildings. They are pretty much done. They're working on the men's room now, and hopefully will be complete by the end of next week. We had security staff on until November 27th. At that time, after that time, the bathrooms and the main gate to the beach are closed. We worked on changing all the locks throughout the park. Our feeling was that there's a lot of people that we don't know if they still have keys. We did a pretty good job of getting them back, but we're not sure. So just to be on the safe side, we've changed all the locks throughout the park. As far as maintenance, GPS is still doing their lawn and cleanup on the beach. John is doing basically any issues that come up and garbage collection. The tree work for Bartlett's complete. As far as volunteer programs, we began a off-season monthly beach cleanup, which started on the 12th of November and are scheduled on the second Saturday of each month through April.
This just started?
What?
It just started?
The
This
beach cleanup?
program?
2 months ago.
It started on November 12th, so there's been 2 of them so far.
And how do we advertise it so people know? I like the idea a lot. That's why,
Bill?
do we just,
We did it through the town's website, through the Facebook. The Rye Town Park Alliance has a
Okay,
Facebook
saw that.
account that has about 460 people on it. We got 17 people the first time, including me. And then the second
That's good.
time, where it was quite cold, we only had 2 of us. So,
two of us, meaning 1 plus you?
yes.
Oh.
But
Thank you for being here.
it's obviously it's a volunteer thing, you know.
Yeah.
people-
It was in the papers, too.
Yeah, that's right. they-
Somehow I missed it.
Yeah.
Oh, so maybe we should put it on the Rice City website too.
Well, we can for the next one, I guess.
Yeah.
And,
So are you continuing through the winter?
yes, well, it's the second, like Terry said, it's the second Saturday of the month. And if the weather's bad, we just cancel it and figure, the first one we did, there was a fair amount. The second one, there was less because we've been fortunate with no big storms or anything like that. We haven't got a lot of, unusual debris getting washed in the way there have been in some winters. So, the biggest, and you're right, there was an article in the Rye Record about it, and one of the main issues that we discovered was that there are all these bottle caps, these plastic bottle caps, which are small, and they oftentimes don't even get picked up by the beach rake, but these are very dangerous to wildlife because birds think they're food. If they get into the water, aquatic animals think they're food, and they can cause choking and starvation because they don't really have any food value. And so the other problem is that they aren't easily recyclable. So I think the message is let's try not to use as many plastic bottle lids. I mean, that's another good reason for reusing bottles is that you're not getting these wasted bottle caps.
Thanks, Bill.
As far as the restaurant, the Seaside Johnny staff has been clearing out the property because we have the 2 maintenance staff on duty. They've been monitoring what has been going on, throughout the day while they're there. Some off-season projects that are being worked on. We had a meeting with Mike Lazarus for consideration in supporting our POS software. We also discussed improvements to automate and make enhancements to our current network software. As far as IT, we continue working with Sullivan Data, who are going to do the upgrade to our network. We also are looking into upgrading our telephone system to a network phone system, which will reduce our Verizon bill. And I had a few conversations with Verizon as to what actually are all the phone numbers that are associated with the park. Also, in trying to automate a little bit more, we've been having conversations with Seamless Documents. They're an online design, an online form design company, and we're seeing how that they can automate our permit and our daily admission fees so that people can make payments online and just bring their phone to the beach and be able to get in. Seamless Docs does a lot of work with municipalities in the sense, they create forms for their different types of permits. So this is a little, out of their scope, but they're really trying to get something together for us. In addition, we've contacted PayPal, and we're waiting for a meeting that hopefully will be before the end of this week.
And maybe somebody else knows the details of some of these things, but since we're doing a number of different, whether it's the point of sale, upgrading IT, electronic forms, whatever, to make sure that whatever we do, it's all integrated, if it can be, and it may not be relevant in certain cases.
Right, and
Absolutely.
I personally would like to know more about what we're thinking of automating and what direction we're
Sure.
going in on that. But
Well,
just
we
to be-
start-
Because I know we're talking obviously with a few different people, just to make sure.
So we started with a planning meeting with Sullivan, Glenn Sullivan. And from there, the only way we took on Seamless was that it completely synced up with what the standards that Sullivan has as well. And we're also planning on the voice over IP coordinated by Sullivan as well. So they're working through that. We have extra bandwidth on the town on LightPath. So we'll be able to add those numbers at no cost.
Do we need, I'm just curious, why do we have so many, if you have to verify phone numbers, it leads me to believe there's a lot of different phone numbers.
No,
Do
there's
we-
not. What happened is there's lines coming into the security office, and we thought that there were telephone numbers associated with them, but there's not.
Oh,
There's actually a fax line, the main number, the lifeguard, first aid has a phone, and then there's a second line in the cashier supervisor office. So those are the only lines we have.
So I assume we're looking at whether that all makes sense in that way. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, also, we're looking into upgrading our security system. Right now, our security system is old. It can't be downloaded onto anyone's laptop because the software is so old, it's not compatible. So right now in my office, there's a little computer monitor that I can see what happens in 4 booths, and that's it. So we're working with a few different companies to see about getting quotes for those cameras to be upgraded, a new security system so that we can better monitor it, from our laptops, and to also put in extra cameras throughout the park. We also had a meeting with Portchester Chief of Police Conley, and he discussed with us ways that he could help improve our security staff. He also offered to give us some equipment that he had. So we will be getting that in the spring. And we also set up a meeting with the Rye PD Commissioner, and we're waiting for that meeting to take place. We've been working on the budget, a draft for the budget, and I believe you'll hear about that in a little while. Special events, we had the Stroller Fit program through the 21st. The Rangers and the Rice City Turkey Run were in November. Assembly Films from New York wanted to do a commercial shoot in the park, but they ended up finding another location, but using our park to serve food and park the cars. We did charge them a fee for that. Bill's working with Angelman and NAMI for their annual walks in May. We're working with Capstone. We have weekly conference calls with them. They're developing a database of stakeholders to send out a survey, which will be mailed soon. And our website is updated, and as of now, Sarah Suma has been established as the official administrator of our Town of Rytown Park Facebook page. So
Cool
that's
beans.
what's been happening in the park.
Thank you, Terry. Questions?
I have just one thing to add. and
Sure, Bill.
This is, the construction, I don't know if you've had a chance to come over to the park lately, but they're putting in the new sewer lines that are going to connect up, coming from down by the Playland parking lot, all the way up to our, where the snack bar is at the north end of Rytown Park. So they've been working their way, and they actually put it off so we could do the 2 races that ran through that general area. But now, that they're getting closer and closer, so it won't be long, I guess, until they start doing the work in the park. So is that pretty much?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. Presentation of the budget. This is our preliminary budget. I'm unfamiliar with prior practices to when the prior administration submitted its preliminary budget, but I think this is fairly early. And Kathy Hamill of our accounting staff is here to present an overview and assumptions.
Good evening. On page 19 of your packets is the first page of the budget assumptions. We presented 2 different scenarios. On the far right side, you can see we have a column of a proposed budget with a licensee and one without a licensee, being that there was going to be a fair impact to the revenue for the park if we do not get a new licensee before the season starts. I can take you through each item. Obviously, the rental income is the biggest impact as far as revenue is concerned, because with a licensee, we would have rental income coming in. Without a licensee, there would be no revenue being received. We also averaged the last 3 years of income for each of the additional line items, the parking fees, the beach admissions, and that was our starting point. But we also assumed that with the loss of a licensee, we're probably going to lose some fees in regards to parking, as well as possibly some on the beach admissions, because we were concerned that maybe there was an issue if people were coming to the restaurant, they then might pay to join the beach festivities going on. So that's where you see the largest impact in revenue.
I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So in addition to the loss of the actual rental income concession revenue line, you're saying that you've adjusted other revenue lines based on the fact that you think that people who come for the restaurant also then leave the restaurant and go use the beach, or
Well, they
vice versa?
definitely, they pave to park when they come to the restaurant, and we estimated that there could be a possibility of people who came to the restaurant were also paying beach admission as well as parking fees.
So, can you, I'm sorry if
We
you just did this,
reduced-
but can you just point to me where that shows up in the actual budget?
You'll see it in the Midgate line item, beach admission Midgate. With licensee, we have it at 343. Without, we have it at 318.
And then also the parking fees drop.
And you said you looked at the last
3 years of
'cause we
actual
know-
fees.
Because we had to pay how did it work that we compensated them for we gave them something off for the parking? So we know how many people parked
Right,
going to Seaside Johnny's.
Right.
for less.
So that data was used to come up with these numbers?
Yes.
Okay.
Skip the second part for the executive session. Okay, under benefits, we do have a new line item that I'd like to bring to your attention, and that line item is training. We've had conversations with Robert Smalt about certification for the lifeguards, the security guards, and general park employees for training for CPR, AED, waterfront rescue, which is something that we feel would be beneficial to everyone who works at the park as well as everyone who attends the park. So we added a line item of $3,000 to cover those certification fees.
The lifeguards already have that, I assume. It's just the rest of the
Well,
employees.
some of them may need recertification during the season, so,
they either need to be certified or recertified. The lifeguards been paying for this themselves.
So
And
this is-
what Bob is offering is to train any employee at the park who wants to be trained. We started doing that last year with CPR training for our security guards who had a rescue after the lifeguard staff were off duty, and they all felt greatly relieved, and it was important. In addition, we have, there are other recreational facilities in the area that make training part of the compensation package for their lifeguards. And so this is something that we're exploring.
The rest of the budget, I would say, is pretty static year to year. There hasn't been many adjustments. The costs are pretty much what the costs have been. It's a fair average over the past 3 years' activity.
Can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
You may have just said this, but I'm trying to listen and read at the same time.
That's quite okay.
So on page 20 of the packet, under administrative, where it says professional fees, is that where the certification for the lifeguards is?
No,
that you just mentioned?
No, I put it under
19.
training
Oh, okay,
on
because that
page
goes up,
19.
that goes up by $10,000. What is that for?
The professional fees, that is for M Group Consulting Services, legal services that may be necessary. Trying to think of who else
Well,
was
are we getting
included
any
in
new
that.
services in 2017 that we didn't have in 2016?
No.
The cost of, so the cost of it is going up by 25%?
It's a great question.
Well, I was going to say, I do not believe that our services were included in last year's budget.
He forgot a few
So.
things in last year's budget.
No, the accounting was included.
All right, so this
It
is
was
just an
included?
initial, we're not voting on anything
Right.
tonight.
No,
but-
no, no,
No.
But I'm glad-
this is
So
what
It's a
we're
great, great
draft.
question, and we'll
These are all
get
good-
you a complete
No,
answer.
these are all good questions. That's- This is a
absolutely.
preliminary budget that we can examine, and we're gonna examine, for example, Kathy alluded to skipping over because we have to review in executive session the wage issue with various individuals, et cetera.
You know, looking at this, I wonder, is the grant writer included in the professional fees?
I assume
Kathy,
that's what
that-
that was.
I
I
believe
think
so,
that's-
but I don't want to misspeak.
We can look that up on
Find
your
out.
worksheets.
Yes.
We'll know we can fill that
Yes.
out, in the next week or so.
Absolutely.
What about retirement? Why was that? It looks like we proposed 0 in 2016, but it wasn't 0, but then it's double what it was.
We currently have 2 employees who are involved in the retirement system, but there has been expressed interest from additional employees. So because of the expressed interest, we were estimating what that cost would be in 2017 to get them enrolled, and what the expense would be to the Parks Commission for that
When
enrollment.
you say expressed interest, what does that mean?
They say that they talked to us about wanting to join the retirement system.
These are full-time employees?
I don't know.
It doesn't
Is
matter.
there a
choice?
Even if they're
No,
part-time
no,
employees, if they're
no, we checked.
municipal
They have the
employees, they
right.
can join.
Oh, no, that
Yes.
makes sense.
They have the right to
Yeah,
join
that
it
makes
if they
sense.
want to.
So can I just ask one more question? So I'm just looking at the bottom line for
Yes.
total expenditures, and the actual expenditures for 2016 were $889,000, and the proposed 2017 expenditures is $1,023,000, which, if I'm doing the math right, is an increase of about $134,000, which is pretty close to 15%, I'd say, of 15% increase year to year. So I guess there seem to be a lot of little things that add up to that number. I couldn't really identify a big thing just by eyeballing it quickly. But I guess, and we do this in the city of Rye, as you said, a lot of the line items are stagnant, meaning pretty much the same from last year. And those lines, I think, we don't really need to know so much about. But if there is a significant increase or even decrease in a line, I think that's where maybe and my fellow commissioners would be looking for some sort of explanation as to why. And there may be a perfectly legitimate reason, but I think we just would probably like to know on an exception basis. So that would probably be my general request.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, so we
I
can
think
take a look at the
You know where the
variances and
big
address
number
every
is?
big
Yeah,
variance.
I think that,
Building and grounds maintenance, so I would like more detail on that, that there's a huge difference in those numbers. So, I mean, there's a lot in the operations and maintenance.
Well, I was going to say,
So
with
if
building
we
and
could-
grounds maintenance, a lot of what has happened is items have been budgeted out separately between tree maintenance, lawn maintenance, and general maintenance, but that's not how the expenses have been tracked. So when you look at the 2016 budget numbers, you'll see that building and ground maintenance was budgeted at 61,000, but then there was lawn maintenance at 35 and tree maintenance at 15. So when you add those three numbers together, they more than cover the total expense of buildings and ground
I'm
maintenance.
sorry, I was comparing it to 2016 actually.
Year over year, yeah.
I have a question
Because
on the,
if the actual came in, so it's fine to compare it to the last budget and that goes up, but if the actual came in lower, and then we're still, still have a question about that. It seems like it did then.
But
Because the
those are,
actual came in at, that's what I don't understand.
well, you're also still incurring costs because those are maintenance agreements that we pay for year-round.
For example, we have still not received a bill from Bartlett, but we know we will.
For the trees that were just planted.
For all the tree maintenance that happened over the year, just the trees were like $500.
So they haven't charged us anything the entire year, so that's why it's zero in this number?
I put in several requests, calls, to
Maybe it's free.
why they haven't billed us. We know
Like
what
the entire year.
Well, it starts in the spring, goes through the summer, and then.
Well, you would think they would want to get paid.
Yes, you think
I think part of the budget also is a reallocation, as Kathy just said, of
No,
lines
I
to
see
reflect,
that, but-
to reflect the actual expenditures over and make them.
But still, the actual is what the actual spent, although if the answer is, we're gonna get a lot of bills in and they're not in here. Yes, it's not much higher than the budget for last year, but it's much higher than actual. Maybe it won't be when we get the numbers in, that was my only point.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're on a cash basis, so if we don't get the bill and pay it till January,
No, I understand your accounting, I'm just saying being
Yeah.
comfortable, getting comfortable with the numbers and why our numbers have gone
Sure.
up so much.
sure, I think that,
Just wanting to understand.
look, I think we're going through this process the way the city of Rye, the village of Rybrook, the village of Portchester, and the town of Rye go through a budget, which is, you get a preliminary budget that you've worked on, and then you have questions, and we, explain it. All
I
right?
have a question on
Ben? Sure.
on wages, salaries. If I read this correctly, on a 2012 audited, that means actual?
Yes.
Okay, so from 2012 to 16 budget, the bottom line total salaries was.
What page are you on, Ben?
19.
Okay.
The salaries from 12 to 16 was $8,000 difference in 4 years. From 16 to 17, you're proposing a $100,000 difference. I'm having a tough time with that, understanding that, not to say that it's wrong, but I don't understand.
10,000, you mean?
No. it's
No, 491 to 548,
four-
right?
448
I was looking
to
at total
548.
Yeah, you look at the budget, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the total salary of 448, which was the budget for 16. And I was just going back in time to see what the trend is, in terms of salaries, and they do fluctuate a little bit, but just from 12 actual to 16 budget, it's only $8,000, but then from 16 budget to 17 proposed, it doesn't matter whether the licensee is there or not. It's still $100,000, and that's a pretty big jump.
Well, I think we're going to be covering this in much greater detail during the executive session, but some of the things you could take a look at is the change in minimum wage.
So
No, I
can
know,
we
but
see
what
the
we're gonna
difference
discuss
in
is
what
executive
minimum wage
session doesn't
versus
reflect
increase in
here.
salaries?
I'm sorry. The-
What,
One at a time.
Yeah, the discussion is not even shown here. So it can go higher, it won't go lower, our executive session discussion.
Oh, could go lower, sure.
Oh, okay. But I don't see it reflected in here, that's why I thought so myself, unless it's,
You have an executive session packet there that does attach underneath what you're holding.
okay,
That
no,
has
I'm
some
just
more
looking at the
detail.
breakdown in terms of.
Yeah.
I'm not picking on any one item, I'm just looking at the overall.
Right, there are a number of policy questions for the commission
Okay.
to
Right,
address with regard to
that's what we'll-
wages.
There are policy questions regarding certain compensation questions that we want to go over before we finalize the budget.
What?
so back to Benny's question, so we'll obviously talk about that, but when we do get to it, it may be helpful to see what portion is due to the fact that we have to pay higher minimum wage and what is just due to higher
Right.
salaries and breaking that down.
Right, exactly.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anything else from the
Anything
commission?
else?
I would just note one thing, it's not a question, I'm looking at page 21 of the packet, and it talks about operating subsidy in the event that there is a deficit in 2017.
Yes.
And it looks like the city of Rye actually pays a higher percentage than the town of Rye, or is that incorrectly inverted?
That's 39% and 60.
No. For operating, that is correct, because that goes on assessed value ratio currently.
Okay.
And the capital, on
Oh,
the other
yeah,
hand,
capital
is
is
switched
60,
around,
60, 40.
where it doesn't show the percentage here, but
It
the,
does 60,
Yes, it
40.
but
does.
but that's
60,
basically
39.
60/40.
On the far left column, it shows.
So for
Oh,
those.
right. The town of Rye for capital is 60, almost 61%, and the city of Rye share on capital is 39%.
But for those watching at home, I think it's significant, I'm not sure that's ever happened before, if it has, I haven't noticed, but that the city of Rye has overtaken the town of Rye as far as assessed value goes, and that's why we're paying actually 54% of any operating loss, and the town of Rye only pays 45%. So I think there's always been an impression.
46%.
There's always been an impression that the city pays less than the town, but I think that's actually not the
No,
case.
I think you made that statement last year, as a matter of fact.
Oh, well then, I hate to be repetitive, but I think it's worth repeating anyway.
Well, and you have. Yeah, it's based on current assessed value, the operating losses, if any. But luckily, we haven't had any yet in the last 2 years.
Right, well, actually, that's the good news that we haven't really pointed out either, that I think is great news, which is that it looks like, Terry, the projected surplus for 2016 is $176,000. So congratulations on that, for sure. That's great.
265. Yeah, 265.
I think it's
So-
more than
so-
that.
so actually-
Joe,
so-
I think it's more than that.
265.
If you look at,
Yellow.
I'm looking at page,
21.
page,
No, we're looking, he's back to looking.
I'm
at
looking at page
the
11 of the
report
budget.
for-
No, go to 21,
11 of the packet.
it's
I
the
should say.
summary.
Yeah, page 11 is to date, year to date.
Well, through November
There's a
30th.
projection on that.
if you look at page 11, the actual versus budget for 2016, the net surplus of at 1130, it might be slightly less because we have some, is 242,526.
Great year.
Correct.
Yes, it was. Great year, bravo.
What is what are we forecasting, fund balance, to
Yeah, this-
put into
yeah,
fund
yeah.
balance, the additional dollars, the net?
That's a policy decision that the commission can make.
Well, we've made it many times
Well,
before.
right, so actually, so if we have, so
We could offset next year as well.
that's my point. So what do we do with the
Right.
is the $242,000, is that the right number now?
I thought it was 265.
That were surplus, where is that reflected in the 2017 proposed budget?
Well, it should be, well, we've
It's not-
passed
it's
many
not in-
resolutions in the
It's
past.
not in the budget, that
supposed
would
to
be
go
in
to-
the audited financial statements.
But it's cash,
So
it's
what
cash
is-
that we have.
What
You
happens
can use it to
Right.
balance the
if there's
budget.
an operating?
It's in the bank.
What happens, we make money this year, so we have money sitting around, we could talk about where it sits. And then next year we don't, do we still go to Rye-Town and Rye-City to
No.
make that up, or can we use?
It's a policy decision.
It's a policy decision.
It'll be unallocated.
So there is no policy?
No,
We
actually,
make the
Paul,
policy.
is there
Well, but there's been
anything in
no
the,
policy in the past.
There
I'm
has
sorry,
been.
Paul,
There's been
in the
motions and
bylaws, is there
resolutions.
anything that says,
No,
no,
it's
well,
completely silent?
They
basically,
didn't contemplate this lovely
no,
problem.
exactly, we've never had this. For years, we
Well-
were running a deficit, so.
well,
This is a high-class
looking at it,
problem to have.
looking at it, from what the law, I think says, is that the operating deficit should be funded in such portions as we've just cited by the town of Rye and the city of Rye. It doesn't have any, it's silent as to whether or not there is a surplus that can be used, as most communities would, take from fund balance to fund any deficit. The law says that the operating deficit is funded by the city and the town in the proportions as their assessed value is.
Maybe the city of Rye should get a 54% refund off that.
Well, on the other hand, at the end of 2015, the commission had postulated the same thing, and the city and town each agreed to take the money that was allocated in their respective budgets of $50,000 and put that into capital.
Right, that was a discussion, but it was always subject to city council approval. And
It was a voluntary, right, and I had made a statement that the town had in fact made that transfer, and I understand that the city council decided its policy that they wouldn't do that this year. Am I correct?
That is correct, but
Okay.
I think, again, the good news is we now have $265,000 to do whatever we want with. Assuming that the law says we can do what we decide to do with it. But, so I think it's a positive storyline right now.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the
But is
correct
that,
number.
that's not the right number, because then
That's
in
not.
2015, we had 160.
Right, that's not the right number. We have more than that.
Maybe it's for another day, but I think we should look at, now that we have this
That would be
lovely
found in
problem
the
of having
financials.
surpluses.
So
what-
generally speaking, surpluses go into undesignated fund balance. And ordinarily, like in the municipal government in Portchester, we frown upon using fund balance to pay for operating expenses.
And we do as well.
And since
As do
we
we.
can, and I know the prior discussions that we've had, now this is going back 2 years, right, my prior term, because we don't levy debt for capital expenses, we may want to put some of this in a capital reserve account to kind of piggy bank it for.
I mean, I think that's what we
We've
would
done that.
The
probably.
multitudes, yeah, right?
We would
yeah.
probably take a percentage of the fund, what you call the fund balance, and put it into, transfer it from operating to capital, and keep that as our capital savings account for use in our capital projects, which we have several coming up.
How much is the total in designated fund balance? Is that in here? Or this is just,
That would be in the financial statement.
Never
Do you remember?
I do not.
Nah, it's
Okay,
okay.
We could get
We
that
can
figure,
figure it
that's
out,
not,
Yeah,
that's not
between
hard to
now
get.
and let's
Yeah,
do
we're
that
positive
between now.
the last couple of years.
No,
should be positive.
we could get that in the next couple of days. All right?
Terry's thinking all the ways to spend it with cameras and stuff like that.
Well, that's what it's for.
No, I know, I'm not complaining, not a complaint. I think that's
Um,
great, being proactive.
All right.
I think, the
Are there any
staff
other
does an
questions
awesome
on the
job.
budget? I would suggest that the commissioners, after you've reviewed the budget more thoroughly, if you have further questions, you would submit them to Debbie, and we'll pass them on to Kathy and get answers as soon as possible.
Well, I think tonight was a good start. I think
Yeah.
you've got a lot of questions to answer. So I look forward to your responses. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank
So we
you.
have the fees also that we at some point need to go over as well.
Yeah,
right?
we
There's,
will.
That's that sheet.
yes.
it's in
There's really no change in the fees, other than the fact that we've simplified the fees so that there's now two tiers. There's 9 to 4, and there's 4 to close, as opposed to a middle fee, right? So that's the big difference.
That makes sense.
Yeah, what we
Yes.
want to try to do is to eliminate a rush when the fee drops. As Terry has said repeatedly, that there's, people wait to get into the beach until the fee drops, and then they rush to the beach. So,
How do we,
well,
so
we
get it-
don't,
it
we
looks like we
don't,
just got rid of the 7 PM change.
That's exactly right. That's when the rush is.
Oh, right before, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was at 4.
Yeah, no, they all, it's a large
sense.
crowd that gathers for 7 PM and then push onto the beach.
That makes sense.
okay. Thank you, Kathy. We're gonna have a brief discussion on the selection of the consultant for the restaurant RFP. The commission had decided that a steering committee would be formed, comprised of 2 commission members, and those are Commissioner Killian and Mayor Pilla. Debbie would be a secretary to the steering committee, and 2 residents would be chosen as members of the steering committee, one from the town of Rye, and Dan Tartaglia has been chosen, and one from the city of Rye, and Russ Gold has been chosen. So that is our steering committee. Unless it's changed, I believe we have 4 proposals in-house. Is that correct, Debbie?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, we have 4 proposals in-house for the steering committee to review and recommend, and hopefully they will be working expeditiously. I know Debbie already sent out an email, a memo to requesting dates for the steering committee to meet and to begin their work. And hopefully, maybe even by the January meeting, we'll have a tentative choice. But that's up to the steering committee.
Is that your calendar? There was a calendar in here.
Oh, yeah, there was. Probably
Oh, I
23?
got it. I found it.
It's towards the end.
Yeah. But it's a 2017 calendar.
Well, 2017 is good unless you're meeting next week,
Oh,
which is
yeah,
fine.
right. Yeah, page 22.
Are you gonna pick dates now? I would suggest you just send, you know,
Yeah, just send
send
us the
emails.
dates.
Yeah, Debbie sent out a memo. Anything further? Any public comment on the restaurant consultant issue? Commissioners?
On public comment, we received an email this afternoon from a resident in Rhinebeck who asked that her email be made part of the record.
Debbie has it.
She has it, so
Yeah,
just
it will be
to
put in
make
the
note
minutes.
that Mrs. Horner's email will be made part of the record.
I didn't see that. Thanks, man.
What was it about?
It was late this afternoon.
No, Mrs. Horner requested that the email be forwarded to
Myself and
Commissioner Salonicho and you, and so that's what I did.
Okay.
it's part of the record,
All right.
actually. It's rented into the.
But it's in the
As long as-
minutes.
Yeah, we'll forward it to, Debbie, you'll forward that to
Fixing
the
the
rest of the
bathrooms.
commission, please.
Oh, fixing the bathroom, okay.
And restaurant.
All right, a short-term restaurant license. We have been getting inquiries from various potential licensees of different types. They range from people interested in taking on the restaurant itself for a year, and those are several different kinds of food companies, restaurant companies, to people who are interested in a more limited arrangement, and including the possibility of carts or trucks. So it's a wide gamut. We, Debbie has, and I to a lesser extent, but Debbie mostly has been escorting them through the premises. And the process is that I've invited them to submit a written statement of their interest in the a one-year license, together with their experience, a proposal for of the concept that they intend to employ, and their readiness to begin operations for the season. I don't want to comment on how many we have received. The commission is aware of that. But we even received, I think, one today, an expression of interest in fact, two, from people who would like to go through the premises. And basically, that's where we are in that process right now. And in executive session, we will discuss contract negotiations. Comments from the commissioners?
So I think without getting into the specifics of any of the people who I guess have reached out, my thought is this. I guess it all depends on what the proposal is, but I would lean towards sticking with the process that we're trying to establish here, which is hiring a consultant, going out and seeking good, solid, long-term type tenants. And I feel that perhaps, and I don't know this for sure, but perhaps one of the reasons why we didn't really get any other proposers last year when we sent the RFP out was because perhaps folks thought that John had a stranglehold on the place, or maybe as a matter of professional courtesy, they didn't want to step on his toes, and that's why they didn't throw their hat in the ring. And I think if the place is a clean palette and is completely empty, I think that there's a possibility that there might be more people that step forward who want to do it. So I wouldn't want to, now that we have the place clear and free, I wouldn't want to now reinsert somebody in there temporarily even, because it might upset that equation that we have.
And
Again,
forego the rent? Wow.
well, I certainly, I didn't say that. I said that would be my initial thought. Now, first of all, the deficit as projected is not 100,000, but it's only 50,000. Okay, so, and we also now know we have $250,000 in the bank from this year. So it's not like we're going to be losing money, even if we don't have a single person in there or even with a truck down there. So I think financially, we can certainly absorb it. And I think, we're not looking short-term, we're looking long-term, and that's the whole reason why we're hiring a consultant in the first place. So that would just be my general thought. I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer, but I'd just like to kind of, mention.
My thought is that you need to have an amenity at the beach to have
Yeah.
people get something to eat.
Absolutely.
Putting the money aside, I don't see how you could run a beach facility with at least having some place that people could go to get a quick bite, either for their kids or for themselves. And it's, I think that we tried very hard to keep John in there, and I completely understand and respect your point about, yes, you're not wrong, that having a clean slate in there is a good thing in terms of being able to find a real long-term tenant. But there's a lot of things that go along with that, right? We have to request home rule legislation. There's a lot of things, we have to go through the RFP process. It's already almost the new year. Nothing is going to happen this year so big. I think that at this point, if we were to choose somebody, they know it's a one-year gig. Top,
Right.
So I don't think that it's going to preclude anybody from bidding for a long-term.
Oh, no, and by the way, I don't disagree with anything you've said. I for sure think that there ought to be some sort of amenity down there. Whether that is burgers and hot dogs and ice cream and chicken sandwiches as opposed to a restaurant, that's the distinction that I'm drawing. So I would be a little bit reluctant to insert a full-blown restaurant in there.
Okay.
But I certainly believe that people ought to be able to buy food to eat.
Well, I don't think anybody is going to.
Aim high.
Right. I don't think anybody for 1 year is going to make a major investment in the space, thinking that it's long-term. We haven't had any feelers in that regard. So I think it's up to the commission to determine the amenity that will go there, whether it's a hot dog burger place, pizza place, taco place, or anything else. I think that's for us to decide. But I think that that is something that we'll have to deal with whatever's before us. And we need to do it, obviously, on a fairly assertive basis, since we're talking about occupancy probably sometime in May. Benny? and
Yeah.
Your views?
Mr. Chair, I just want to, for the record, that I've already received a number of phone calls from constituents expressing concern about there not being a restaurant there, and that one of the things about the beach that makes it there, it's a passive amenity, if you will. Is the restaurant passive or active? But you get my point, right? Having it there is something that is,
Well, restaurant, do
more-
they say
more
restaurant
than
specifically or
ancillary.
snack concession?
well, no, they're talking about, like, some of the calls I got was restaurant, you
They
know,
want it out, they want it out
what do you call the early bird special or happy hour and things like that? No, really. People, you know, particularly in your community, as a matter of fact, folks in Rye, and Rye Neck, in fact, are some of the folks who had called me besides Portchester. And I'm optimistic. I think we can do okay. Mayor Sachs' point is well taken about we want to ensure there's integrity in the long-term process. But if we're giving somebody a one-year deal and that's all they have, you know, maybe it's a fresh start with the RFP. It's a fresh start.
My question was to the chairman was, would it even be possible for somebody, if we awarded a real restaurant, for somebody to get a liquor license by this summer?
And
Possibly.
Possibly
You have 6 months.
if they already have a business with a liquor license and open a new business, that shouldn't be too difficult. Again, that's a determination for the business person to make. Benny, did you have something?
I think we cross the bridge when we get there. I think we got proposals, let's vet them out and see
Right.
what's in the best interest of the
All right.
park.
Do we have a deadline for proposals and any level of detail that we're asking for, like level of specificity?
The level of specificity is, as I've discussed it, in terms of proposing a concept, and the type of food, et cetera, and the ability to be open, their experience, et cetera. And I've
But we're
also
looking
request-
for a financial proposal?
Yeah, and
Without getting into the details of stuff that we-
I've also suggested to them that if they feel comfortable doing it, they should set forth their proposed license fee. Now, obviously,
And
this
if
is,
they're not, what
this is something that we would negotiate with them. But it's a lot different if somebody proposes a license fee of $5,000 and another person proposes a license fee of $95,000. You know, we have to be comfortable with the concept and the fee. So, any further comment? Public?
Should we establish a deadline? I guess, you know,
Well,
I guess
I-
how long, working backwards,
I think
when
we
do
Sort
we?
of, it's,
I think,
Yeah, oh, absolutely,
we have,
yeah.
I think
Year end?
we can discuss that in executive session.
You're in this.
It's 5
It's
days
11.
away,
Any-
yeah.
Any comment from the public on this?
Should we have an article in the newspaper?
Further from the
Well, that's
commissioners?
just it. If we're going, if we're soliciting, you know, financial
These have
proposals,
been,
maybe we should pitch it.
these have all been unsolicited, you know.
yeah, it's amazing that we get this many, but
Right.
we didn't even try.
Didn't try.
Which
Mr.
shows
Gold
you how
from the
to-
Restaurant Advisory
It's not,
Committee.
it's not that we haven't tried. I mean,
What do you
you know,
think?
people have
Oh, we haven't
spoken to
really.
people.
No, I know, but it
Yeah.
it hasn't.
Mr. Gold?
Honestly, I mean, I've been able to observe the amount of gear, equipment, infrastructure that's being moved out of that place, you know, so I assume it all belongs to John Ambrose and his associates. I think it's kind of just wildly optimistic to think that we could get a full-blown restaurant in there, built out and operating in 5 months.
Never say
No, we're
never.
not-
No, you're right, I know, and I agree, everything, it's nice to be able
Yeah.
to aim high, but I'm, you know, I'm struggling with the realistic part of this. I did have an inquiry from a neighbor of mine, that's a company called Urban Landscape could possibly be interested in an operation, this sort of they work on this sort of this, I'm sorry? Urban Space, I'm sorry, Urban Space. And thank you. they operate in sort of a, I just looked at it today, so they operate in sort of a pop-up type model, and they do these things. So they're kind of like, they're short-term deals, you know, where
They
they'll
have them
have
right by my
a nu-
office.
Right, there's a number of, in the
It's
city.
right in
That's
the,
sort of what we want. I
in
mean,
the
that's what we
Helmsley
want
building, right by
specifically,
And
but
I
the
just
idea
got
is
an inquiry,
essentially
I just got an
pop-up.
inquiry about that, so I'm gonna meet with the
Send them in.
person, you know.
Might be
Well, I
easier than
think
we
what you
think.
should do is refer them to Ms. Reisner.
Might be easier.
Yeah, no, you know,
Because
I'm not.
actually, the city of Rye has
not
been
gonna-
getting inquiries as well. and
Yeah.
What we've been doing is, Debbie, we've been sending them to you,
Sure,
and I saw a couple
I'll
of them
forward it
on the
over
list,
to
so-
you, you know,
Thank you for-
absolutely.
That term is that's exactly kind of what we.
Right, and it would be, it would be a couple of different vendors, just like see these pop-up, you know, holiday villages and stuff, but it's all,
We've
it's
had,
food service.
we've had inquiries from fairly well-known names looking for that kind of thing, which obviously don't want to divulge in public at this particular time.
Sure. Again, I kind of agree with you all, is that I think it's absolutely essential that we have something for the patrons, even if it's just, you know,
Yeah, we
like
don't want heat
the old
stroke.
sandbar days, you know, just burgers and fries and, you know, and milkshakes and, you know, and beer, you know, whatever.
But I do think it's interesting, you know, Dennis, this was kind of my point before. Last summer, we sent out a full-blown RFP, and we didn't get any responders. This year, we haven't even put out an RFP, and people are banging down our door. So I think that says something about.
Well, for different things though, we're talking, but respectfully, we're talking really apples, oranges, bananas, and pineapples, right? Pop-ups,
It's very
trucks,
fruity.
concession stands is different from really what we were asking for was the whole kit and
But
caboodle.
also,
I'm not
if you
saying that.
recall, one of the major stumbling blocks was that there wasn't enough time
Right,
for a
right.
full-blown restaurant. 'Cause
Exactly.
we had an organization also that were very well-known, I'm gonna remain nameless, and stuff, but they said, look, no, you know, we put it out in 2015, he says, no, we've already have, all our planning is done through 2017, so they need 2 years.
Well, and with the
So that
RFP,
kind of thing, so-
with the RFP process,
Right.
they'll be able
Hopefully.
to do that.
Right.
Yeah, there's three components out there. You have the north concession, you have the concession at the beach under the restaurant, and the main restaurant. So
Right.
conceivably, there could be other opportunities when you divide it that way, and it's not a conglomerate, it could
Right.
be divided,
And-
for
and-
different flavors.
And Benny, in addition to that, there's the possibility of the so-called cart or truck. In addition to all of those, that may be on a specialty basis.
Really a pop-up.
You know, if I could just make one remark, actually, for something that we're only going to do for 1 year, I would just caution the commission and the staff, really, that, to have like 4 different operators kind of a thing for something that's only a year, it makes great sense for the longer term, because you could bid the things out, but we have like logistical issues, and I don't know how many kitchens there are, and, the
Right.
logistics of getting supplies in and stuff, you're just kind of like, it really is creating an
now-
intensification that we have to consider, I
right
think, in the
now-
short term.
It's nice to think about these things, but right now, as of today, we have very few super firm offers.
Yeah.
And we have a limited time. Ideally, we should be entering into an agreement in January so that they can get going. February at the latest.
Right.
So we have to have some alacrity to this. If there's no.
Can I have one more thing?
Sure.
So Russ, you had mentioned that you saw things being carted out of there. I wasn't down there to see that, so I guess there was some, issue as to what John was entitled to under the lease, and there were a couple of different clauses that, depending on how you read them, they could favor us or they could favor him, and I guess, Mr. Noto, did we satisfy ourselves that
Yeah, we
whatever he
actually,
took, he was entitled to?
Actually, there were several walkthroughs with Debbie, and yeah, we worked it out. So I think
That's very reassuring.
Yeah, I don't think there was
I mean
never a
that
dispute.
sincerely.
I mean, we're still having some discussions about some utility bills that he said he paid into security deposit, but, I mean, Debbie was at the walkthroughs, and I think they weren't fine. There
Do
was
we
no-
regard the hood and the fire suppression system in the
That's the
kitchen?
most
That's
important.
ours.
That's ours.
There was no
The
debate
Ansel
about that.
system.
There's
Then
no
I'm
question about
confident-
that.
Yeah,
I'm
that was clearly in the lease.
Right, and
That's
that's,
the most important
right,
thing.
that,
is
that is clearly ours, it's there. There are other things that we agreed that he would leave,
Easy.
and we have a list of all of those.
Yeah, we have video of the pre-walkthrough and post-walkthrough, a list of,
Well, if you have that, you'll have a
we have
restaurant
all-
by
yeah.
June.
And we kept some recipes, too.
Gary,
Kidding.
Can I just make a comment on that? One of the things I think while you're in an executive session reviewing this, I really think you need to think about our alcohol policy. without the restaurant, you know, what is our policy gonna be? As
Same as it
far
is
as, yeah, but it's only gonna increase because there's nowhere for people to go to have
Well,
a
that's if
drink.
we don't have a restaurant,
Yeah,
but.
but we have a
yeah.
policy, I think we have a policy.
I mean, we do.
No alcohol on the beach,
Right.
right?
That's
the policy.
That's the policy.
Right, but one of the things you have to take into consideration is there was alcohol on the beach because the alcohol that was bought at Seaside Johnny's was actually brought onto the beach.
But that means somebody wasn't doing what they were
No,
supposed to
because
do.
our policy, we
Well,
we
we'll
were,
definitely have to talk about it.
Right.
I agree
Yeah,
with
that's a
that.
Right.
discussion.
Thank
That-
you.
That is a discussion.
you know,
And
so
I'm
I just want to
confident
bring
that you
it to
can have
your
a restaurant.
attention. It's something we really need to
Okay.
talk about and put in detail for this coming season.
And step up enforcement, I guess.
Yes.
potentially.
Mhm. Yep.
Thanks, Terry.
Good.
Before we get a motion to go into executive session, it was mentioned briefly, this is Paul Noto's last meeting with the commission. Paul has resigned effective January 1st. He will be taking a senior position with the Westchester District Attorney's Office, where he will probably find much fewer headaches among the criminals than he does among the commissioners.
At least we're not being considered criminals up here, you know?
Not yet. No, not yet. Wait till he gets there. And I just want to thank Paul for his service. I've known Paul, I guess, since he was, not when he was mayor, but when he was county legislator. And I was a trustee in Rybrook, and I was a real pain in his derriere.
You were?
And we have grown to work closely together, and I will miss him. And I would be remiss in not saying that his replacement as town attorney is Jeff Binder, who is here, and most of you know him. Jeff has a history, I believe, with you, Joe, and with Julie.
We went to
and
law
Eric-
school together, didn't we, Jeff?
DA's office.
And the DA's office,
DA's
yeah.
office, yeah. And Julie served with Jeff on the Charter Revision Commission. So we will miss you. You gave us great service, even though you could be a pain in the, et cetera. And we certainly wish you well. And
Thank you.
I still have your cell phone number.
You do.
Yeah,
you do.
I-
Thank you.
You're not gonna
I would
want
just like to say thank you to Paul. I know you
Under
sent us an email, which I
circumstances,
still have not responded to, but congratulations on your new position.
Good
That
luck.
sounds-
Thank you.
Sounds
Thank you.
very exciting, and thank you for
Yep.
all your work on
Thank you.
behalf of the
And
commission.
yes, you all actually did send me emails, and I appreciate it, and I thank you. It's been, it was unexpected, I have to admit it, and nothing I anticipated, but Judge Scarbino, I've known for many years, and he did ask me to join him, and I'm happy to do that. I did want to say that I've enjoyed working with the commission. I've had 3 Rye City mayors. I started with Otis, 2 town supervisors, 2 Rybrook mayors, 2 Portchester mayors, Mayor Pilla being recycled back in. The only consistency was Benny, who's been here from day one with me,
Amen.
which, of course, told Joe he should appoint you, because Benny is from Amerenik. And of course, I've known Julie Killian for years. Actually, I know her husband. He's a tremendous tennis player, and one of the few I'll admit he's better than me. He's a very good player. And so I do think you're somewhat underappreciated. I think you do good work, and it's hard what you do. And the park is a very important resource for the community. And I know that, you take your roles very seriously, and I think the public sometimes doesn't quite, appreciate all the work that goes into running a park. So for that, as a resident of Mamaroneck, I'm certainly very grateful. And I know Jeff's going to do a great job. I've briefed him on as much as I could. But he did say, Joe, and go way back in the DA's office, so you have a history that's helpful. And he can help, guide you through what I think will be a very interesting year as you go through this whole restaurant reconfiguration. So I do appreciate your kind words.
Mr. Noto, you've been a pleasure to work with,
Thank
actually.
you.
You've been
Good
a
luck.
consummate
Good luck.
professional.
Thank you.
Good luck, Mr. Bender. Welcome.
Thank you.
May I have a motion to go, you want to say anything, Jeff?
Second.
Well, I'll just say thank you very much for the trust you're going to be placing in me, and I hope to fill Paul's shoes. They're big ones, and I have a lot to learn. And you know, one thing I said upon assuming the role of Town Attorney of Rye was, and that holds true here, is that, you know, number one is I hope you'll be able to trust me, because I'll call them as I see them in terms of legal issues and matters of the day. Good or bad, I'll not sugarcoat my advice to you, so you get as straight a read as possible. And the second, you know, major thing I'd like to convey to you is that you'll have access to me like you had access to Paul. Everyone will have my cell phone number, and it's virtually 24/7. So thank you very, very much. I look forward to this.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have motion for executive session to discuss personnel matters and contract negotiations.
Motion and second.
I'm sorry, before that, on a question, do you need any authorization to continue the dialogue or discussion with the potential short-term lease? Do you
No,
need that?
that's under contract negotiation.
Okay.
Is there any
That we're going to
deadline
executive
that we want to shout out there, working backwards from when we meet?
I think we should discuss the short-term lease negotiations.
Okay.
And
Then we'll come back in public?
well, if we have a
No,
decision
we're
to
not
make,
coming
I don't
back.
think we'll need to come
We're
back.
not coming back.
We're not gonna have any motions or resolutions in public session. So we're going into executive session without the expectation of coming back into public session. We have a motion. We have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Where do we
Happy
go for
holidays.
executive
Happy
session?
holidays, Christmas, happy
I think
That's
holidays.
what I thought.